Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Jason Godbey and I'm a filmmaker and content creator based in New York City. Today we're taking a look back at the revolutionary Sony FX3. In February of 2021, the FX3 was released as the little brother to the Sony cinema line. Since then, it has taken the film world by storm, being used for smaller projects like short documentaries to epic sci-fi features like The Creator. Back in 21, there was some debate as to whether or not it was indeed a cinema camera. I put this camera through a real-world test, and here's what I found. I have to say I really dig the form factor of this camera. It's a mirrorless camera, but it does have a solid body construction. It has a little bit of weight to it, but it's not heavy. I was running around the city carrying this thing, and I think it's a great run-and-gun camera. I really like the top handle. Having the XLR inputs and not having to sync sound in post is a real time saver. There are a bunch of mounting points on the body which are very useful if you don't want to have to put a cage on the camera. It also has a built-in fan which prevents it from overheating and is surprisingly quiet. One thing I must praise the camera for are the tally lights and the multiple record buttons. There's one on top of the camera and one right near the lens. It makes it so much easier to hit record, especially when you're using the top handle. I could even customize the shutter button to record as well. This is a huge improvement over the A7S Mark II. Another big improvement was the screen. Sony finally got the memo and added a fully articulating touchscreen. It's certainly head and shoulders above the A7S II. The touchscreen feature works really well for focusing and for navigating the menu. One drawback is that the camera is small, so the screen is small. If I were to use this camera on a real job, I'd probably add a monitor, but I was running and gunning around town and had no issues even in the bright sunlight. Oh, Sony and your menu systems, what can I say? Even though this menu is a bit more user-friendly than previous Sony cameras I've used, it's still a Sony menu. There's a programmable function menu which makes some features more accessible, but it's a mystery to me why Sony lets you program certain features and not others. The same holds true for the customizable buttons. Sony has been a true pioneer in outfitting cameras with the ability to shoot in high frame rates in 4K. I use the S&Q mode on the camera to shoot in 120 frames per second. It's a miracle that a small camera like this can do so much. It's one of those features that separates the Sony line from other cinema cameras. For some reason, Sony decided not to include shutter angle in this camera. It's a little thing, but it's something that makes the camera more of a cinema camera. It has shutter speed, which is fine, but it only offers the shutter options of a mirrorless camera or a DSLR. You still have to shoot at a 50th of a second or 125th of a second instead of the more precise 48th or 120th of a second. Normally, this isn't something I would complain about, but they are calling this a cinema camera. Is it a deal breaker? Of course not, especially not for someone like me who's coming from a DSLR shooter background. There are several autofocus options in the FX3. The autofocus tracking is pretty amazing. We were shooting at night, I had a moving subject. Even when I was handheld, I was able to lock focus tracking on the subject and not lose it. It also has face and eye priority tracking, which works really well. This is another area where Sony really pioneered the technology, and it's one of those features that makes this such an excellent run and gun camera. In-body image stabilization is another area where Sony revolutionized these small cameras. The steady shot feature worked really well in the A7S Mark II, and it continues to amaze here. I'm not a gimbal guy, so it's great for me to be able to handhold this camera, walk around with it, and still have stable footage. This camera is the perfect size to use on a gimbal, but you can still get some really steady shots without one. The low light capability in the FX3 is outstanding. Again, this is Sony's bread and butter. This is a 12 megapixel camera, but Sony shows us that it's not the quantity of pixels, but the quality. We went into the night with this camera and the proof is in the footage. Beautiful and clean. The Sony FX3 offers a wide variety of picture profiles. There's nearly a dozen presets in the camera that are customizable. I'm not a big fan of S-Log and trying to color correct it, but this camera also has S-Cinetone, which a lot of people seem to like. I did a quick run through of the picture profile so you can see the difference between them. For the most part, the colors look pretty great right out of camera. With all of the options for color in this camera, I'm sure you can find one to fit just about any project. So that's what this camera has. Let's talk about what it doesn't have. It doesn't have built-in ND filters, which I have to say is a lifesaver on a shoot. When using a camera like the C100, that was so much easier just because of that one feature. But again, the body is tiny. There's literally no place to put ND filters. Is it that big a loss? I would say no, but it would be a nice to have. You're going to find features like that in its bigger brothers, the FX6 and the FX9. The FX3 is also missing some features like false color and the previously mentioned shutter angle. There's also no electronic viewfinder. I was able to use the light meter in the camera to set my exposure, and it was pretty much dead on. I really didn't have an issue with images being under or overexposed. As far as the EVF, I really didn't miss it. I was fine using the screen. On a job, like I said, I'd probably add a monitor, but at no time was I wishing I had an EVF. All in all, I had a great time using the FX3. It's a lot of fun to shoot with this camera. I don't normally say that about Sony cameras. I never thought I'd say this about a Sony, but it's surprisingly user-friendly. So who's this camera for? I think it's an excellent run and gun video camera. It can take stills, but I wouldn't say it's for hybrid shooters. This camera is definitely made for video. I think you could use this camera on all kinds of projects. Because it's an all-in-one camera complete with audio, it would work great for event shooting or documentaries. You could throw a shotgun mic on this thing and shoot all day long. It's lightweight and it's not going to kill your back at the end of the day. This might be the ultimate docu-cam. I think Sony meant for this to be a B camera to the higher end cinema cameras like the FX6 and the FX9. So if you already own one of those cameras and you're looking for a second camera, this could be a great lower budget option than buying another FX6. In 2022, Sony released the FX30, which has many of the same features, but with a smaller APS-C sensor, which could be a great alternative if the FX3 is out of your price range. Personally, I wish I had more time with the FX3. I would love to shoot a movie on it. I would love to see what the images look like using cinema lenses. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the Rokinon cinema lenses for this review, but I think that would be a great combination and it wouldn't break the bank. Since my initial review of the camera, I've used it on a number of shoots. I shot behind the scenes on a big budget feature with it, and I have to say it's one of my favorite run and gun camera setups. It may just be Sony's best camera for the money. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
This is the BTRP Media Network.